On Tuesday, Congressman Dean Phillips and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison met with Moms Demand Action to talk about combating gun violence. Moms Demand Action is a grassroots organization that was started following the 2012 Sandy Hook tragedy that works to combat gun violence. They discussed the bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was recently signed into law, the first major gun control legislation in almost 30 years. They also talked about the issue of ghost guns, which the Biden administration has also taken steps to regulate. This conversation comes as Biden announced his Safer America plan, which aims to further reduce crime and gun violence by investing in community policing and crime prevention programs.
Hi everyone, I'm Erin Zamoff, co-lead of the West Metro Moms Demand Action Group with Catherine and Julie. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. As Catherine said, it's a busy time of year. I know you all come from all communities in the West Metro, some which start after Labor Day, but I know Edina Public Schools have started, and so it's a busy time, so thank you so much for coming tonight and prioritizing gun violence prevention. So we are just thrilled to have Congressman Dean Phillips and Attorney General Keith Ellison with us today to talk about some exciting new developments. We, for the first time in nearly 30 years, have some new federal gun safety legislation, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. So we're going to hear from them about that. And then also, last week, the Biden administration finalized a new rule on ghost guns, and so we're going to talk with them about that as well. So I'm going to just provide just a brief overview of these new measures, and then we're going to have a conversation with the congressman and our attorney general. So with that, just a quick overview. So the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, it creates incentives for states to enact extreme risk protective orders, otherwise known as red flag laws. I know some of you know what that is, but just to remind you, it allows police or family members to secure a court order if someone is a danger to themselves or others. We do not have an extreme risk law in the state of Minnesota. This provides funding for implementation and encourages states to enact these laws. And I just want to note, again, it's bipartisan. 15 Republican senators voted in favor of this legislation. It's really something that we should pass here in Minnesota. It closes the dating partner loophole. So it expands the current prohibition of convicted domestic abusers from possessing or buying firearms, and includes not only those who abuse their spouses, but their dating partners as well. This had been a loophole for a long time. We know that domestic abuse occurs beyond in dating partnerships, and so this prohibition is now extended to dating partners as well. It also significantly expands and allows more time for background checks for buyers under the age of 21. And on this, as we have noted in recent mass shootings, 18 to 20-year-olds commit gun homicides at triple the rate of adults 21 and up. It clarifies also who is, quote, engaged in the business of selling firearms and is considered a federally licensed dealer that must conduct background checks. So it provides funding to states to make records more available in the background check system. It also establishes the first ever federal laws against interstate gun trafficking and straw purchasing to stop the flow of illegal guns into our communities, and I know we're going to be getting into that with the Attorney General. The bill includes $250 million in funding for community-based violence intervention programs, and then also money for mental health and school security measures. So, it does a lot. Is it everything we want? No. But will it save lives? Absolutely. So it's a step in the right direction, so we're going to talk with the Congressman and Attorney General about how we're going to implement that in the state of Minnesota. Now then, turning to the ghost gun rule. So just as a reminder, a ghost gun is a do-it-yourself homemade gun from easy-to-get building blocks or kits that are acquired background check. They have no serial number, they were untraceable, and they were the fastest growing gun safety problem in the country. Minnesota, and again, the Attorney General can speak to this, but Minnesota law enforcement, we're seeing a surge of ghost guns recovered at crime scenes more and more each year. And I don't know if you all recall, there was a shooting last New Year's Eve at the Mall of America that injured 2, and an 18-year-old had purchased an untraceable ghost gun online in that shooting. So we are seeing them in Minnesota, and the new rule, which went into effect last week, updates the definition of firearm to cover kits and components easily assembled into ghost guns. So that means that ghost gun sellers will now have to abide by the same rules as any other firearms dealer. So they must be federally licensed. The parts must be marked with serial numbers. This is really important for law enforcement and for prosecution. And purchasers must conduct a background check. So just as a reminder, the serial numbers will allow law enforcement to trace any self-made guns that are used in a crime. And as I said at the start, more and more of these ghost guns were turning up at crimes in Minnesota. So I want to thank all of you who, some of you may have submitted comments on this rule. Moms Demand Action Volunteer, your congressperson or your senator, or submitting a comment to a rule, your participation can make a difference, and it did in this case. Now, it is my honor to introduce Congressman Dean Phillips from the 3rd Congressional District, which covers much of Edina and many other cities in the West Metro, where you all live, and the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison. Both really have been strong advocates of common sense gun reform, and we're really excited for you all to come here today. And I think I'm going to bring you all some, we'll use all right. Oh, okay.
Hey everybody, how's it going out there? My microphone's working?
All right, well, welcome.
It works.
Okay. So we have a few questions for you, and I think what I'd like to do is start with the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act and the impact it will have in Minnesota and how it's going to be implemented. So with that, I'll start with Congressman Phillips. I guess first is, what was your reaction to passing the first major gun safety legislation in almost 30 years, and how do you think it will impact Minnesotans?
Well, my reaction was, it's about freaking time. And let me just start by thanking all of you. I mean, moms demanded action, and we finally got it. And I mean it sincerely. Without you, not just here in Minnesota, but throughout this country, relentless, passionate pursuit of action. Without you, it would not have happened. And rest assured, what absolutely would have happened is to get 15 senators, Republican senators, to get on board. And I just want to start by thanking you. I had the easy role in this. I voted yes. You had the tough role, and that was organizing, mobilizing, energizing, and inspiring a Congress that had been way too slow to take note of what was happening in our country to get it done. So that's my reaction, and that was the easy part. Implementing it, measuring it, and taking additional steps will be the great challenges we face, but I trust and expect that we're going to get up to the task.
Great. And Attorney General, how do you think your office will work to implement the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act in Minnesota, and how are you addressing these issues on the state level?
Yeah, thank you for the question. If I may just say thank you very much for your vote on that and your work on it leading up to it. And I was in Congress when the tragedy at Sandy Hook happened. I was in Congress when the tragedy in Las Vegas happened. I was in Congress when the shooting, the mass shooting at the Tulsa nightclub occurred, and we all went down to the House floor. And let me just tell you, John Lewis, the late John Lewis, led a group down there, and I had a meeting that I couldn't get out of in my office. My mother saw that folks were doing a sit-in on the House floor. She called my office. She said, "Get yourself on the House floor." And my assistant walked in and handed me a note and said, "Go to the floor." Your mother said, "Go to the floor." and I went right to the floor, sat down. Next, and because my mom was, we lost her to COVID in 2020, but she was fiercely in favor of sensible gun laws. I remember when I was a kid growing up in the city of Detroit, one summer, we had like 380 people under 18 shot. And so look, Moms Demand Action, I definitely agree with Dean on this. Thank you all very much. So what did I think was passed? Absolutely. It's going to save lives. It's going to help a lot of people. Let me tell you, the Attorney General. So here's the thing. Dean asked me, did I miss Congress? I certainly do miss it, miss the people. I would have loved to have been able to serve with him and Angie. But the thing is, we need people to enforce the law too. And so that's what the Attorney General does. There are a lot of things that the Attorney General can and will do to enforce the law. One of the things I just want to share with you is that when it comes to the states, the legislation is that when we have businesses who sell to straw purchasers, this is a very, very important part of the problem. There's one retailer locally who is, I'm actually looking at quite carefully, who sold 97 guns to one person in a year, and about 10 of those guns turned up in crimes. I doubt that one person needs to buy that same style of gun 97 times in 1 year. Clearly what's happening is trafficking. The law will help us deal with that. So that's just one clear example. Even on the issue, I may jump to the ghost guns. Is that all right?
Sure.
On the issue of these ghost guns, let me tell you, we've seen about 100. They've turned up about 120 of them in the last 17 months have been caught in crimes. Imagine if I told you that car out there that doesn't have tires on it is not a car. You know what I mean? And then I had 4 wheels right there that you could put on with your own jack. And I said, and I could sell it as it's just car parts, right? Closing that loophole is really a big deal. 120 guns in 17 months, crime, they're showing up in crimes all over the place. And they're not just ordinary guns often. Oftentimes, they have an extra little mechanism that will allow them to shoot in a repeating way very rapidly like a machine gun. And if you've ever, handled a firearm yourself, let me tell you, you can get a veteran firearms supervisor and say, handle that automatic pistol with one hand, and you really can't do it. People who know guns and use guns have a tremendously difficult time keeping that, aiming that. So what happens when a gun like that gets in the hands of some juvenile? That's why you get spread multiple shootings. That's why you spray a crowd, because that kid can't handle that gun. And so for those reasons, this is a dramatic and important increase. And I'll just close up by saying, last time we had a good gun law on military style weapons was when we had I think it was the assault weapons ban. When it expired, we saw a dramatic increase in shootings with those style weapons. So I'm hoping that this bill that Dean just passed and with his colleagues, that there's more we can do. So.
If I could just say one more thing too, and I referenced it, but I see Heather Ellison in the House and Steve Elkins. It's easy pass these laws in Washington, but the implementation, the resourcing, the allocation is going to be very local, and Keith's role as well, not to mention so many others in statewide offices. But passing a law and allocating money is one thing. Identifying the people, training them, preparing them. We have a deficiency right now in our police departments. We don't have nearly enough school counselors. Yes, the money will be there, but this is not an overnight, magic wand, if you will, that will change the trajectory of what we've been facing. It's going to take a heavy commitment of time, energy, and resources, most importantly human, if we're going to make these dollars work the way that we hope to. And that's why your advocacy still is going to be of great importance as we try to recruit the people necessary to make it work.
Great, thank you. And so it sounds to me like what you were saying is that the new law is going to help law enforcement and also prosecution of gun trafficking, correct?
Absolutely, no doubt about it. It will, for example, you can keep guns, you can prevent crimes with the red flag law. There's a number of ways that people end up dying in gun-related deaths. One of them is domestic violence. And a red flag law will do a dramatic improvement in just keeping guns from people when they are in a very volatile state and have proven themselves to be violent. The other provision that Congress passed that's important is intensified background checks on people under 21. As you know, a lot of these shooters are under the age of 21, and they have extended the waiting periods and more scrutiny. The shooter in Uvalde would have been blocked from getting a gun in this situation. So I think that there's not one of these provisions that would not do a lot of good. As I said, we have some people under active investigation right now for enforcement action who retail guns to a lot of them to the same person, and these guns show up in crimes. So I would say, just to put a fine point on it, if you look through all the provisions, they all will prevent deaths, and it will give legal authority to enforce the law.
Thank you. So it sounds like you both believe that this legislation was a step in the right direction, but Congressman Phillips, what do you see as sort of the next steps Congress should take on reducing gun violence?
Well, I'd have to say universal background checks, and I think the assault weapons ban, the evidence indicates that it worked. Now look, again, is it the end-all be-all? No. There are three categories here. We have mass shootings, which are, of course, the most frightening to any of us because they're so random, often happening in schools, like the one we're sitting in now. We've got crime with handguns that Keith has just spoken about, and then we have an epidemic of suicide. These are all very different challenges, and I do believe, though, the next steps are background checks and the banning of semi-automatic weapons. We did, and it's constitutional. We've done it. During the Clinton era, we did so. It worked in the 1930s, in the gangster era. We banned automatic weapons. During the political violence of the late 60s, we strengthened handgun laws. So we've done this effectively, constitutionally, and I believe should consider doing so again. And I would make the argument that it shouldn't be just guns. It should be anything that can cause mass human carnage in a matter of moments. That's why we can't carry hand grenades on the street. That's why we can't carry bombs, bazookas. We do this. Why do we allow this loophole, if you will? So I see this not as frankly anything noteworthy. It's doing what we've done in just about every other category to prevent carnage. Let me make one more point. I think it's really important. We can't just do this as an imposition on gun owners around the country. We have to invite them, actually, I think, to the table. I encourage all of us to consider how we approach this. Because right now there is a belief of many in this country that it is the aspiration of people like me and people like Keith and so many of us who care so deeply that we want to take everybody's guns away. I own firearms. I understand that mentality. And I think we have to be very cognizant of how we approach this. and bring people to the table who right now see us as part of a slippery slope. We have to make it very clear that this is not an initiative to ban the sale of firearms across the entire country, every single category, take them from people. This is about, frankly, the assault weapons ban is prospective. It's not, no one turns in their guns unless it's at their own election. This is the future sale of those weapons. This is not taking guns away. We have to make that very clear, or else we will not stand a chance of doing so.
Well, on that front, Dean, let me just add, one of my favorite things to do in the fall is to sit in the blind and wait for some turkeys to appear. And I do it. I am a turkey hunter. I love to walk through the fields with a few folks and hunt pheasant as well. This is nothing to do with that. This is not about that. This is about 200 mass shootings in 300 days. That's what this is about. This is about women who are subject to domestic violence. It's about people going to a movie theater and having a mass shooter break out. That's what this is. People being in a school, kids being in a school. Can our kids go to school and not have to worry about this? I can tell you, we were in Rosemont, I think a few weeks ago, and a number of students came and said, we are really worried about this. And so that is what we're talking about. We should not let anyone confuse us into thinking that we're talking about taking the guns away. We're not. No one is. Let me also say, there was a recent Supreme Court decision that basically overturned a 100-year-old New York law. That New York law is called the Bruin case. Basically, in New York, it's like, look, you can't have a gun unless you show us that you need one. It said, no, you can't have a gun unless the state can show that you don't need one. That's essentially what just happened. They flipped the onus onto the state as opposed to the person. And then the other case before that is known as the Heller case, which basically said the average person can own the average gun for home defense. I think both of these decisions were wrongly decided, but I don't think that these decisions are any massive barrier to activists. I think that we can certainly work with. I mean, I'm not endorsing these Supreme Court decisions. I'm simply saying that none of us in this room should think that this is going to block us from being able to regulate guns, because in the Second Amendment it says regulate. The word is in there. And if Clarence Thomas needs a word to hang his hat on, well, the word's right there, regulate.
Well, and as you all said, part of our group, we have gun owners, we have people of all parties, and vast majorities of Minnesotans support these reforms, like background checks and all gun sales. And so this is something that the majority of voters want. Yeah. And honestly, I think I speak for all of us that we're frustrated that these steps haven't been taken. We appreciate the steps, the recent steps that have been taken, but we obviously want more. And speaking of that, within the framework that we have now, what else can your office do to try to prevent gun violence in our community? What steps are you taking?
Yeah. Well, let me just say, some steps that I am in fact taking right now, I hate to say this to everybody, but I can't tell you exactly what they are, because when we file a lawsuit against somebody, the public finds out when we file the lawsuit. So what I can tell you is that there are some retailers who have caught our attention. And I'll just say that if you sell a gun to someone who you have reason to believe is going to sell that gun, who's not legally authorized to have it, then you are engaged. Then you're engaging in illegal activity. And my opinion is, if you own a gun retail shop, you need to be extra careful that the person you're selling to is not turning right around and selling and trafficking those guns. Because if you are, the Attorney General has the authority to hold you accountable for that. And I guess I'm not naming any names. Please don't make me do that. But I can tell you that there are several retailers who have caught our attention. So restrictions in place. So there's at least several actions we've taken to help get us to the point where we have a rule that President Biden just signed restricting those guns. First of all, me and my fellow attorneys general wrote and submitted comments on the ghost gun issue. Then in Texas, there was someone who said, no, we should be able to sell these ghost guns. And then we together teamed up and filed a lawsuit in defense of the rule, and we prevailed. So there's a number of things that we're doing. They're not all litigation. Some of them are helping to make good rules and then enforcing those rules, and some of them are speaking up in favor of support of sensible gun laws. And again, I've just already told you that there is a tool, a litigation tool, and it is something that we are investigating actively now. So.
Great. And so this is a question for both of you. Obviously, gun violence prevention is important to all of us. We're here on a busy weeknight. Why is gun violence prevention important to you both personally and professionally? And I'll start with you.
Well, I think like most, if not all of you in this room, I've got children, I've got daughters who were afraid to go to school, high school, who I was afraid for when they were in college, who I'm afraid for now in Manhattan and Austin, Texas, because it's a human condition to care about your kids, especially when you see so much of this violence, unfortunately, is directed to and perpetrated by young people. I think being an American patriot begs for doing something like this. Sitting on the sidelines and saying 240 years ago, a bunch of guys sat around and could have anticipated mass human carnage in this country. There would be a stain and shame on all of us. It is not to me a defense of doing nothing at all. You say professionally, as a lawmaker who took the oath of the Constitution to protect us from threats both foreign and domestic. I'm doing that. I'm trying to do that. And I think too many of my colleagues have forgotten that oath to protect against threats domestic. And that's why professional business is just as important.
Thank you. Attorney General?
I don't know which case to pluck out. I'm not sure which one to pluck out. So I'll pluck out the one involving a kid named Tespo Jackson. Tespo Jackson was a teenager, and I represented him when I was a public defender. Got to know him. I liked him. Thought he was a good guy. We resolved his case in his favor. He was not responsible for what he was accused of. That does happen. And then one day his mother called me and she said, Tespo got into a dispute with some kids and shot and killed in North Minneapolis, where I live. Miss Jackson had 5 children, 4 of them were killed in gun violence. She was a wonderful lady. She was a compassionate person, but she lived in a community where I believe violence was simply tolerated. So I could pluck out more. I mean, I got a good friend named Princess Titus. That's her name, Princess Titus. You know Princess. Mm-hmm. And she's a wonderful mom on the north side. Her son was a great hockey player. And it's not that common for black kids to play hockey, but this kid was an awesome hockey player. And he was a good boy, and these guys pulled up in the alley. He was in the backyard. There's no reason to believe he had anything to do with what their beef was. And you know the family. And they shot him down. And my law office, after I left the public defender's office, I had kind of a law office in the Minneapolis Urban League building. Because when I was in the state legislature, that's all I could really maintain. And so Princess worked in the Urban League building, and my law office was in there. And she would come in, knock on my door, and joke around. And so would he. And he'd have on the hockey gear, and we'd joke about him playing hockey. And then one day, he was gone. So I don't know which one to, I don't know which case to, I don't know which case to leave out, which one to include. Too many. So I think that my experience with gun violence is not mass shootings, but I have had accidental death close to me. Parents had a weapon for home defense. Kid says, "Hey, let me show you something really cool in Dad's closet." Tragic accident happens. So, I don't know. Just too many funerals. Too many lives cut short.
Gun violence is now the top killer of kids in our country. And
Yeah.
so, part of that's the reason why we're all here, is we're tired of that. And then professionally, why is gun violence prevention important to you?
You know what? I believe that if there's one function that government must provide, it's safety.
Amen.
I think it's a core function of government. The core function of government is safety. And safety should not be your own personal responsibility. I think one thing we can do together is to make sure we all make it through. And so I take that on as a major responsibility. And let me just say, if you are not talking about getting a handle on the guns, you are not in a serious conversation about public safety. You simply can't do it. And let me just say, I say this as an elected public official, politicians demagogue crime a lot. Yeah, shocking. They do. But the rubber's hitting the road when we'll say, okay, so you're all against crime, yeah, we all are. What about the guns? And if they say, oh, nothing about the guns, we can't do anything about the guns, we're not talking for real. We're talking imaginary. Tough on.
I think it's quite a paradox to be tough on crime but soft on guns. Mm-hmm. Think about that for a moment. And think about the people that talk about being tough on crime. I'll leave it at that.
And I will thank you for that. And I will just add that we are here because you can take action. We can have policies that reduce gun violence. There's different gun violence rates between states, and states that have stronger gun laws, guess what? They have lower rates of gun violence. So we can take action and we can make a difference, and that's why we're all here. And speaking of that, could you both speak to what concrete actions we, Moms Demand Action volunteers, can take to help further your goals and our goals of reducing gun violence?
Well, I think as a starting point, I think we should all collectively start advocating for research. Many of you might know that until just a couple of years ago, we were precluded from allocating and appropriating any dollars to the CDC to even study the issue.
Does that not blow your mind a little bit?
Is that amazing? To study, it wasn't because of lack of action. We were precluded from doing so. That's how intentional they were. Not unlike, frankly, how the tobacco industry was for many years, not wanting to expose the dirty truth. These are the truths. We are really fortunate, I'm sure most of you know, that we have the Violence Project here, headquartered in the Twin Cities in St. Paul. Dr. Jillian Peterson and James Densley, two of the foremost researchers into gun violence in the United States, particularly mass violence. And I would argue, when you ask this question distinctly, Aaron, I think that's where we got to start. And the truth is, a lot of what we passed, I think, will be helpful. But I can't tell you that all of it is evidence-based because we've not done the research necessary. That's really just starting right now. So I would ask, implore, encourage, and invite all of you to help us push that. And I ask you to look into the Violence Project because when you do so, you might learn a few things that might surprise you. Things like the propensity of mass shooters to have had a parent who committed suicide. To recognize that social media, video games, are not usually the causes. They're accelerants, but they're not the causes, based on the research and the evidence. So I think we have to level set things a little bit and identify what is happening who is doing it, and why. And lastly, I'll say, I think we've reached a tipping point now where more people are buying guns because they're scared than because they want to use them for sport or for criminal activity. And that's true in North Minneapolis, where kids feel if they don't have a gun, their life is at risk, right? It's true throughout this country, where people are acquiring guns at just extraordinary rates because they believe that if they don't have one, someone's going to be in my yard or in my house or in my building or in my neighborhood that does. So we've got to stop that. And I think that goes back to public safety writ large, which is when people are feeling unsafe, we are only going to see more guns on the street. So we've got to address this from a holistic perspective, and I think it starts with the research. And frankly, even all of us in this room, take a step back. Let's let the research dictate the steps we got to take and make sure it's evidence-based. And if we've got facts on our side, I know we live in an era where not everybody believes in them, but at least it's a darn good starting point. And I think over time, truth will prevail.
It's not easy for me to tell Moms Demand Action what you need to be doing. I think you're doing a great job. I think, quite honestly.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, so often we take our lead from you. And I'll just say this. Sometimes as an elected public official, and Dean will agree with me, we're called upon to answer questions, and people, and Scott will agree probably as well. And it's like we're supposed to know everything. Well, we don't know everything, believe it or not. And so often it's committed community advocates who teach us stuff. And so I guess I'll say, please keep doing that. Please keep bringing forth your stories. I do think that if I could offer some ideas, you'll probably say we're already doing that, Keith. But you asked, so I'll offer it. I think it would be great for you to find a bigger megaphone. And I don't know if you have a Moms Demand Action podcast, but if you don't, I hope you start one. A Moms Demand Action radio hour. Start that. And you can talk about so many things like Dean said, but just the research. You can talk about people who've, you could get gun owners on, hunters on. I mean, you could get people, and of course you can get people who suffered tragedy. People understand that not all of the gun violence is just, urban areas where kids are shooting at each other. It's not just mass shootings. These suicides need to be highlighted. They say about suicide, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. You need people who are just going through a bad patch. And if they just had somebody to talk to, they could get through it. But what they have available to them is a gun, and in their mind, they think that by taking themselves out, that they're doing everybody a favor. That's how the suicidal mind, thinks. I'm gonna burden everyone who's gonna be out of here. But it's not true. That they need to know that they're loved. I think it's important to sort of focus campaigns on that, because I think it is, we talk about the demographics of crime. And when I say demographics, I'm talking about race and age and sex, okay? Keeping it real. A lot of these some of the violence we're talking about, Princess's son, young black man. Some of the school shootings, often you see young white guys. White men over 50 non-college are in a suicide crisis right now. And if you look at their demographics, they're being hit with opioid deaths, cirrhosis, and suicide. But within our society, some people are allowed to have problems. In fact, in our society, some people, we presume and assume, have all kinds of problems, like people of color, right? It's okay to talk about black dysfunction. It's allowed in our society to say, oh, them, you know how it is with them. But white men don't get to have problems. You ever notice that? They gotta have it all together. And if you gotta have it all together, but you're just a person and nobody has it all together all the time. You think about the pressure that you are under. People losing their farms, people being put out of work through mechanization. There's all kinds of stresses on all of us, and we've got to open some doors, and we got to increase the circle of our compassion to include everybody. So I would think that raising some of these things would be important, but you guys you're already doing it in so many ways.
I had one note. I think what our Attorney General just said about inclusion is perhaps another invitation to all of us, and that is to include some of the fiercest defenders of the Second Amendment in these conversations. And it might surprise you, but I have discovered through some trial and error, but that by engaging some of the people who are on the most extreme end of an issue from me, not only changes their perspective when you listen to them and sit at the table with them, but we actually learn something from it. And I'll give you a quick example. I've got, like anybody in public service, had a lot of trolls on the internet. And there was one in particular who, no matter what I posted, would find something to just rip me apart on, constantly ripping me apart, constantly. And I would never respond. But once we were starting to put together the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, he had written me on something. I looked at his profile and I saw he was a fierce defender of the Second Amendment, but he was also a firearms trainer. So I thought, you know what better person to reach out to and share a draft of what we were working on than him? And I did. I DM'd him on Twitter. He was shocked. He apologized for some of his, as often is the case, for some of his vitriol online. And I shared with him a draft. And I put some trust in him that what I was sharing would be something he would take a look at and respond to. His gratitude was immense, and the time he took to respond point by point by point to everything I sent him, the detail was remarkable. But what was most extraordinary was he supported it, almost in its entirety. And my lesson from that was we need to invite people. If we're just going to continue, a lot of this issue isn't about common ground. There's plenty of it. A lot of it is about the imposition many on the right have based on the initiatives, the aspirations of the left. And I say that because I think there's a there there. I really mean it sincerely. And I think by inviting some of these firearms trainers, defenders of the Second Amendment, they don't want their kids shot in school. They don't want anybody breaking their house and killing them with a gun. They might see the tactics to prevent it or to address it a little bit differently, but we are on the same page. We share the same ground when it comes to wanting to reduce gun violence. And by the way, that's how I addressed it with this guy. I said, I trust that you, more than anybody else, want to reduce gun violence because that is your profession. Training. So I say that just because I think that's where we have to take some steps in a little bit of a different direction. And if we do so, I think we can actually achieve a whole lot more.
I just want to say that I think gun trainers might be good allies if you want to make a campaign on gun locks or gun lockers. I mean, and then the other thing, a lot of people just buy guns new, like you were talking about how, when people feel afraid, they go buy a gun. And a lot of them are not that great at caring for that gun. And so a lot of times, you find people who are inexperienced with guns, forgetting them in their car, and all this kind of stuff. Gun trainers might be a good ally group. They're not ever going to agree that we should reduce the number of guns. I imagine. I don't know. I don't want to assume, but they probably will be pretty good allies in terms of how to secure the ones that are already out there.
Yeah, no, thank you both. So I think we're going to wind it up, but on that note, I just want to tell you two about a program that we have called Be Smart.
I know I brought these notes.
And it's all about, it's a way that we can bring in gun owners and supporters of the Second Amendment, and it's an educational program to promote secure gun storage. And the emphasis is that it's an adult responsibility, and that it's a gun owner's responsibility, and it's something that we all can help. And it really is a message of everyone coming together to protect children, but it also has some good benefits for suicide prevention. And just to finalize on that note, 75 to 80% of gun violence in Minnesota is due to suicide. We have a high rate of suicide by gun. So anyway, the Be Smart program, we're going to be talking about that at the end, but I just want to thank you both. I know you're both incredibly busy for taking time out of your busy schedules to meet with us on this really important issue, because we're all here because we care about it deeply, and so thank you.
Thank you, Erin. And I want to celebrate our Attorney General and so many who are working daily around our community, around the country, to make it safer for all of us. And I think it goes without saying, I think to wrap this up, if we really want to go upstream on this issue, we got to take better care of kids in our country. Every single one of these issues, the cauldron of these issues, starts at early ages and early stages. And that was your career in Congress, and it is now. It is surely mine. It's all of yours. There's a lot that our country just doesn't do for kids that our peers around the world are, and that means early childhood education, child care, safety, security, juvenile diversion, and improvement programs. We're just not taking care of kids. We're putting them behind bars. That only makes it worse. So if we really want to collectively end this, and I think we can someday, it's not just with what was done in the Safer Communities Act. It's going to be what is done in buildings like this, in neighborhoods all around this country, and we can all play a role in that. And I want to invite you and thank you for what you've done so far. We've got a lot more work to do. Thanks, Erin.